It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. It is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso on S3. Today is a special one because we also have True FM Breakfast broadcasting live from your feel-good breakfast show, and they are there, and you'll be seeing them throughout the show today. But now it's time for us to put the spotlight on the one and only JP Sebastian. In fact, he's not here to talk about movies, but more particularly recommending some documentaries ahead of South Africa celebrating Freedom Day tomorrow, the 27th of April.
And so celebration is obviously a term that we deserve. And it's great that people get a time to, say, let their hair down during a time like this. But I think I chose movies that I believe, this is compulsory viewing for you, by the way, if you're South African, if you're a human being. And the first one, in fact, was like a force around the world. I wanted more to do a segment of reflection, or a little portion of the show on reflection on Freedom Day and observance of Freedom Day. And we can do celebration in between here and there.
So the first one, Last Grave at Dimbaza.
Again, these are not just recommended, but compulsory viewing. Last Grave at Dimbaza. A lot of us, so, you know, the question is freedom from what? And it's easy for us to all know and feel deep down inside that apartheid was evil. But when you see that a documentary is available to you in vivid technicolor, it brings home so much worse just how dark, funny enough that it's in color, apartheid was. And how this was filmed is that it was secretly, clandestinely filmed in South Africa, because obviously, you know, they're not going to welcome documentarians just coming in during 1974. That very brave people like Nana Mahamo was in the Bantustans, where they were, like I said, secretly filming. And so it jumps between the affluence of the white areas and the complete desperation of Bantustans, where black people were forced to go. And in fact, the wording is such. It starts off with a quote by the Deputy Justice Minister at the time, Froneman was his name, who said that women and children are mere superfluous appendages to black male labor. This is how human beings were thought of, like livestock, that women and children were a hindrance to them doing their jobs properly, and that's why half of black families were separated to Bantustans. In Cape Town, it was 85% of black families. And so what this documentary is great for is that it, like, we can speak in, and it's because it's hard to capture apartheid and what it did to people and what white supremacy did to Southern Africa for centuries. So sometimes it helps to just see something that's the nuts and the bolts. So it gives you these heavy statistics, including, you know, the fact that in Bantustans, black people had, well, let's start with white areas. White areas had one doctor to every 400 people, and in the Bantustan you had one doctor to every 44,000 people. So there's video footage of, and it's a white doctor, I think it's a Danish doctor, who's like, he's looking desperate, he's like, face is ashen because he's desperately trying to work through people who are dying, who have been made to die. And just like one of the most grotesque ways that it was put, in fact, is as policy, if you were a black maid in a white area and you gave birth, you were allowed a period of weaning your child. And then that child was separated from you, again, like cattle, like livestock, to go to the Bantustan, make your plan with whoever else there, and you continue your work in a white area. It's like I said, it's easy to talk in broad terms, but once you get down into the nuts and bolts with a documentary like Last Grave at Dimbaza, it really does help bring into sharp focus just how disgusting and how desperately in need of repair our country is from the legacy of apartheid.
So now we have a reality, and a shocking reality that we have to see. I love that you said it's compulsory viewing. We also have Cuba and Africa, honestly, that you want to touch on.
And this one I want to bring up because another way that we can get a bit wishy-washy, I don't want to undermine that though, is that we often talk for... by the way, that man there you might recognize, Nelson Mandela. He insisted that the first foreign politician he wanted to meet on his freedom was Fidel Castro. Why is that? It's because Cuba was an indispensable part of our liberation as black, colored, as people of color in South Africa. And so this chronicles Cuba all the way through the 60s, up to 1991, where just an insane volunteer spirit, where it was about 1 million Cubans came to Africa in a standing formation of about 300,000. So, I mean, 1 million individuals rotated in and out to be a force of 300,000 against apartheid. And so while it jumps from where they had a country in Congo because they were trying to figure out, there's your man, Che Guevara, my man, trying to figure out their feet in the Congo, landed in Tanzania. That was a bit of a shambles because they were trying to figure out how do we actually become helpful? How do we, inject ourselves into a continent that we're not part of? How do we make connections, etc., etc.? Then they went on to Guinea-Bissau. Then they went on to, and obviously Angola is where the big one is. And contrary to, they moved so quickly and so impressively that the United States thought that Cuba was invading. It was only years later that America realized that they were responding to a South African invasion.
Yeah.
And overnight, even against, because another mistake that people make is that they say, oh, Cuba was controlled by the Soviets. The Soviets were so peeved that Cuba was making moves just on their own like that. And it was not because of resources, it was not because of oil or anything like that. It was just because what they left with, by the way, after they liberated Angola, was they just went home.
Yeah.
South African apartheid military had to leave Angola, give back Namibia, and apartheid started rapping. So an amazing contribution that that country gave to us, and hey, I'm thankful for them for every day. Cuba and African Odyssey is this huge, epic chronicle.
Incredible. So we've ticked off 2 of the documentaries you highly recommend. Apartheid Did Not Die, 1998.
Again, not pulling punches here, are we?
No,
So
not
at all.
in the name.
1998, and so it is this retrospective of, like, all the policies that were implemented. Did it bring about any of the changes that you might have seen from the lost graves at Tembaza, where, they cite there, for example, that white minority had 5% of people basically sat on 80% of wealth, and that number has not changed in a remarkable way all this time. So John Pilger is the documentarian here, and he's an investigative journalist who, like I said, does not pull punches. And he was banned from South Africa, in fact, apartheid South Africa, because ridiculously, when he reached customs at the airport, when it said race on his form, he wrote human.
Oh, wow.
And the apartheid government was like, no, go. So they kicked him out the second he landed, basically. And so for the longest time has been both a friend as well as a very honest friend who was ready to criticize the ANC and ready to criticize the government at every turn. The documentary then goes into another aspect that I think we neglect historically as average South Africans, is that we sometimes think, oh, apartheid was about representation. Oh, it meant JP couldn't get a pumpkin spice latte at a coffee shop or whatever. And obviously, yes, we do try to cover heavy stuff like Soweto, like Sharpeville, etc., etc. But what he highlights here is that it was also an economic system. Like Lost Graves at Tembaza, made clear to you, it was a purposeful making proletariat of black people, making them just workable, cheap labor. And it's for that reason that in that documentary and in here, it highlights that white people has some of the highest living standards in the world. And in World Bank terms, the World Bank has South Africa as the most unequal country on record. So the question becomes, when you watch retrospective things like this in 1998, has there been any remarkable change? And raises more important questions that it's economic, it's not just representative. So you're going to learn about stuff like the Washington Consensus, which average people don't know about, or structural adjustment programs. And so this says that, oh, privatization, this, hands off on government on that, etc., and you have to ask these really hard questions like, was that medicine actually what South Africa needed? That documentary will help you figure that out yourself.
Reality is important. I think documentaries do bring that to life. So this is fantastic. I gave you a list there. Lost Grave at Tembaza. You got Cuba and African Odyssey. Apartheid Did Not Die. Another honorable mention is For Everything Must Fall, which you couldn't get to. But watch those documentaries and open your eyes this Freedom Day as we hit the Joburg.